Hey everybody, how's it going? I hope you're having a lovely day. Today I'd like to go over a directive from the EU that was voted on, over 500 in favor and under 10 against. So it seems to be pretty popular and it has a good chance of actually being put into law. This is about removable batteries on consumer electronics and appliances. Back in my day, again, I'm old enough to remember when this was not considered repair. This channel goes over repair a lot, but this was not repair. Replacing the battery on your device was basic maintenance. You would take off the back of a device using usually your fingernails or a Phillips screwdriver, do this. You would put the new batteries in, you would shut it with a standard screwdriver, and there you go. Nowadays, you have devices that are glued together and adhesed together, so you have to use a hot plate and mold denim wire and cut up your hands and specialized tools to get the back cover off. 50% chance you're going to break it, and then you got to take the battery out, which is also glued in after you've already dealt with the glued on back, and it's just a royal pain in the ass for people that don't want to spend a bunch of money on tools to try to do it properly or just to replace a battery. And every single device that comes out has their own specific proprietary way of gluing everything together, and it's just everything is kind of put together like a booby trap now. So I'm old enough to remember when this was not a repair, but maintenance. And I'm also old enough to remember that society seems to have this collective amnesia regarding water resistance. There was an article going over this where it said that one needs to be aware that incorporating easily removable backs will mean these handsets will lose water resistance unless a well thought out design is undertaken. Again, selective amnesia for devices like the Samsung S5, which is IP67, or the Sony XP10, which is IP68. This device is IP68 with a user removable battery. Either way, let's dig into this directive. I'd like to read from the source material and go from there. Article 11, removability and replaceability of portable batteries. Portable batteries incorporated in appliances shall be readily removable and replaceable by the end user or by independent operators during the lifetime of the appliance, if the batteries have a shorter lifetime than the appliance, or at the latest at the end of the lifetime of the appliance. The battery is readily replaceable where, after its removal from an appliance, it can be substituted by a similar battery without affecting the functioning or the performance of that appliance. And the TLDR for the rest of this very dry 130-page document is that they would like to draw up guidance on the removability and replaceability of portable batteries and support that guidance so that companies have an idea of what is going to be expected of them and how to comply with this piece of legislation. So let's dig into it. Firstly, what do I think of this legislation? Am I for it or am I against it? I'm honestly sad that we've gotten to a point where you actually need this legislation to begin with and where this is even being discussed. Many people who tend to be more libertarian or anarcho-capitalist leaning will say that this is stupid because the market has chosen, the market has won, people do not want phones with removable batteries. And while I tend to lean libertarian in some cases myself, I also think that argument in some way is bullshit because it's one of these false dichotomies of choice where you technically have choice. It's just the choices themselves are utter garbage. So you can say that customers chose this. And one of the reasons I dislike that framing is because they'll say it like customers actually like this. They want this. This is giving people what they want, when the reality is a little bit more nuanced than that. So you had flip phones that had removable batteries. Then you had semi-smartphones with removable batteries, and then you had full smartphones with removable batteries. You had an entire array of different smartphones where you could choose the iPhone without a removable battery, and then there were a bunch of other companies that made phones with removable batteries. And people started to get used to having smartphones with removable batteries. They moved up from the flip phone to the smartphone. And then once people got hooked in the smartphone, once they had made it an integral part of their business and their personal lives, once it was very integrated into the fabric of our business and personal lives, every smartphone manufacturer just kind of on a whim took away the removable battery in their smartphones. Virtually every manufacturer has taken away removable batteries in their smartphones. So you're stuck in this weird situation where, okay, you like smartphones, you're used to smartphones, they have been integrated into the fabric of your life. Now you have the choice to either A, F off and deal with a non-user removable battery that you didn't have to deal with before, or B, go back to the Luddite 2001 flip phone. Technically, that is a choice. You can choose, after you've gotten used and weaned onto this cool new idea, to immediately stop using it and go back to a flip phone, or deal with a smartphone that has a non-user removable battery. But again, to me, that false dichotomy of choice is falling into the libertarian lolcowish argument of, yes, users want this. They love the non-removable battery. They praise the non-removable battery. I think for a large majority of people, they liked smartphones, they got used to smartphones, and they were not aware that every single smartphone company was planning to take away the user removable battery. The second thing that I want to go over here is, again, this false dichotomy that this is necessary for liquid resistance. I very much so like liquid resistant smartphones. I remember having a BlackBerry Curve 8330 and then a BlackBerry Storm. The BlackBerry Curve 8330 was one of the worst devices I've ever used. If you washed your hands and you dried it, but there was still a little bit of dampness on your finger, and you typed into that phone, it rebooted and it never turned on again. Those devices, for people who did liquid damage repair for a living, they were a way to literally print money. It wasn't something like the liquid seal had broken or this person dumped it into the ocean or something. Literally typing on that phone with a moist fingertip killed it. Again, like, I'm smiling because like my first Crest ultrasonic cleaner just paid for itself within 2 weeks off of people with Blackberries that were just typing on them with heads that were mildly wet. Like, it could rain outside. You have this phone in your pocket and it dies. I understand that liquid resistance is important. It is, and I value it in my electronics. That being said, there is this crazy selective amnesia we have. It's almost like somebody from the manufacturers came out with Will Smith's thing from Red and Black and did this to make us completely forget that it is possible to design a device that is liquid resistant that also has a user removable battery. These have existed for a very long time. Now, in this article that is talking about this, it says that these devices will lose their water resistance unless a well-thought-out design is undertaken. And point taken, one of the things I go over on this channel a lot is that devices are not really very well designed anymore. I mean, there's a lot of design flaws that exist in new devices that didn't exist in old ones, and they seem to just not get fixed 4 or 5 or 6 years later. In the cases of some companies we're not going to name here that like to put a 50-volt power line next to a 1.7-volt data line on a non-liquid resistant connector that's right on the edge of a case that goes straight to a CPU. But in all seriousness, you can have liquid resistance. The next thing I hear is that devices are all going to look like absolute garbage if they have a back that is removable rather than the sleek sexiness of the device that I have here. I don't understand. So you have a phone like this, it's the Pixel 6 Pro. You have to have a case on it because the thing has no bezel and a very cheap feeling back that's going to crack if you drop it from 2 feet. It gets fingerprints on it everywhere. So you put a case on it anyway because the back is going to look ugly and filled with fingerprints because of the material they use now. Unlike the material that they used to use that would not get fingerprints on it. Used to have these textured backs like what you have in the Moto G, which is 1/4 the cost of this thing that was made a long time ago. You can do this and get no fingerprints on it versus this where it gets fingerprints the moment you pick it up. This phone's back, again, is not very durable, and so it's going to crack easily if you drop it, which is why you put it in a case. After you put it in the case, you can't even see the back of the phone anyway, so why do people care? And it's not like we didn't have good-looking phones back in the day. Anybody remember this HTC Sensation 4G? This was a sexy-ass phone, man. This thing was a classy product, and it had a user-removable back. When you put this phone in your hand, it feels like premiumly handled aluminum. Not aluminum. I know that Dave Jones watches this channel from time to time. It felt really good. Very well-made device, and it had a user-removable battery. Yes, the S5, okay, fine. Like, the back of it was cheap shit. But it doesn't have to be cheap shit. That was Samsung making an individual design decision there. And the next thing there is when I read the arguments that are made in favor of this, it's very difficult for me to tell if this is astroturfing or just people actually losing their mind. One comment that I read said, and I quote, "Serviceable batteries, yes, but don't make it easy to open the phone up. The only reason I'm replying to you on this device is because the person who stole it was unable to power it off or pull the battery out when I use Find My Device Ringer to locate it. If you can pull the battery out, a stolen device is instantly gone. Adios." That's not the first time I've read this argument. This is not the first time I've read this argument. And it really does make me wonder, are we living in a society that is completely, fundamentally brain damaged? Or is this a sincere astroturfing campaign? It's hard for me to believe that sane, rational people are arguing that you should not be able to replace the battery in your products easily. It should be difficult to do that so that if a thief comes up on you, holds you up with a knife, that you should be able to shut down the device instantly rather than that thief instantly throw the battery out. Because thieves exist, we need to make the maintenance of every device in the country as difficult as humanly possible, as aggravating as humanly possible, so that you have a chance to find your phone quicker if somebody steals it. Because I'm confident the type of person that types this is the type of person that walks around locked and loaded, ready to follow the person that stole their phone, walk up to them and say, "Give it back or else." Yeah, right, Batman. Seriously? Seriously? That's the argument that people are making. So we've heard liquid resistance, which is from selective amnesia, because we had liquid resistant devices and we still do that have user removable batteries. We've heard the argument that, again, it's going to make the phone look bad because we didn't have any sort of premium smartphone designs 10 or 12 years ago, which I believe is untrue. And again, these designs, they suck. Hold the Pixel 6 Pro in your hand, man. This phone feels cheaper than an HTC Sensation from 12 years ago. And thirdly, again, these types of arguments. It's hard for me to believe that these are real. While I've tended to be neutral on this type of legislation, it's really hard for me to understand the people that actively argue against it, that say, yes, I want it to be as hard as possible to replace the one part on my device that's damn near guaranteed to die in 2 or 3 years. The one part that, regardless of how well I treat my device and how well I baby it, is guaranteed chemically to die in a specified period of time. That's the part that I want to be as hard to replace as possible, and I don't want you to make it easier for me. Don't you dare demand that things be like they were just a few years ago and you could replace the batteries on liquid-resistant devices that you own. That's insane. Even as somebody who's been neutral on this, it really is insane to read all of the comments that you'll see from people that are actually arguing for the right to be abused. Why? Why? Some people have said that when the battery is glued into the phone, it is more sleek, because this is not a sleek device, which, I mean, again, even I get it, it's 12 years old, but even by 12-year-old standards, it's a pretty damn sleek-looking phone. This doesn't take effect until 2027, and I'm very curious how this is going to work. If this is implemented, which I do think there's a good chance of it being implemented, 500 to less than 10 votes on this, are they going to make separate phones for the EU? Or are they going to open up the design for the rest of the world? That's a really interesting question. I'm very curious to see where this goes. Because me personally, again, I am not a person that's going to be simping saying, yes, lock me down harder. Make it harder for me to maintain my stuff. And I don't believe that manufacturers are gluing the battery in solely because they think that this is going to force people to get a new phone. But it's just one of those death by 1,000 cuts kind of things where lots of people are very consumeristic. They look at new toys, they want new toys, and we have a way in our society to justify using our brain what our heart wants. So our heart says, I want the new toy. Your heart says, I want a new $80,000 truck. So what you do in your brain is you say, well, I get 15 miles a gallon on my current truck, and that one gets 20 miles a gallon. So in the long run, I'm technically making a proper decision by buying a new truck, when in reality, you would have to drive that thing 800,000 miles for the difference in efficiency to actually pay itself back. Since moving to Texas, I feel qualified to say this. If your truck payment is higher than your house payment, you might just be my neighbor. I think people do this with their devices. They say, well, this one's kind of looking a little beat up, and well, the battery's close to dead, and I might as well get a new one because it's going to be so hard to replace the battery. And it's just one of those things where when you make it easier to replace the battery, when you make it easy to spend $5 to $20 and just pop it in 20 seconds, it removes that excuse that furthers the consumeristic instinct that lives within us all to buy crap that we don't need, to go into debt for things that we don't want, to impress people that we don't like. And I don't think that something that suppresses that instinct while simultaneously allowing us to reuse and fix things in an easier way than what we're doing now is a bad thing. That's my take on it. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. That's it for today, and as always, I hope you learned something.